Welcome to the Geek Homeworld. I am your host, SavageTechman. We talk sci-fi, TV, movies, superheroes, and all from a geek perspective. You can find us on Blogger, Google+, Twitter, Facebook. We're everywhere. Join the Geek Homeworld. Welcome to another wonderful episode of the Geek Homeworld podcast. I am your host, Ed, aka SavageTechman. Welcome. Thanks for geeking out with us again, getting your geek on, doing the things that geeks do. We talk about stuff we love, and this is one of the things that I like. James Bond. James Bond. We're talking about the news this week of Daniel Craig turning down nearly $100 million to do 2 more James Bond films. I think they got him a box of candies and everything else, and he said no. After Spectre, which was the last Bond movie, which to me was not as good as Skyfall. It was still good, and it had a little bit more gadgets in it. You know, I've always wanted more gadgets in my Daniel Craig Bond, right? But after Spectre, he said that he would, quote, rather slit his wrist than do another Bond movie. Plus, Daniel Craig had also suffered a small injury during the filming of Spectre. Anyway, he was already, Daniel Craig, the highest paid Bond at $55 million per Bond movie. And it seems, I guess, unfathomable to most of us, regular Joes and Jills and of the world, to walk away from $100 million. But I guess when your heart's not really in what you're doing, your passion's really not there for it, then maybe that is the wisest choice. Let's see, in a Rolling Stone interview from 2012 that came out just before the release of the biggest Bond movie of all time, box office wise, Skyfall, Daniel Craig had said, quote, I've been trying to get out of this from the very moment I got into it. He also said, but they won't let me go. I've agreed to do a couple more, but let's see how this one does. And obviously that one was over $1 billion at the box office worldwide and did very well domestically. And I think even for the lack of Bond gadgets in Skyfall and for really all of the Daniel Craig, the 4 movies he's done so far as Bond, I think he's been a very good Bond. Even though he was probably described as a more visceral, kind of going with your gut kind of Bond, not as much as Pierce Brosnan, who's one of my favorite Bonds. And I'm not going to go through our list of Bonds. We have a previous show talking about Bond that you should check out here on the podcast. But I think Daniel Craig did a very good job. It was almost like a Batman Begins reboot of the Bond series, and that's what Daniel Craig's Bond movies were for me. And probably the best non-Bond movie was The Bourne Ultimatum. That could have easily been a Bond movie without the gadgets so much. But in light of Daniel Craig's announcement, it's going to obviously bring up the question of a new Bond, and it's going to go with, I believe the producers are, the fact of a non-traditional Bond, such as a man of color, or even, let's push it this far and say, why not a female Bond? I don't know if that would be Jamie Bond. I don't know if they would even use the name. But I'm wondering, will the name Bond start to mean the same as a 00 agent? Because you had 006 before, and you have different 00 agents besides 007. Thus meaning any actor could really step into that role. Now, purists of the Ian Fleming books and the Bond movies on screen may have a difficult time, maybe a very difficult time, accepting anybody but a white male British man as Bond, just because that's the way it's always been. And that's how Bond was originally written. Now, they may end up, the true diehard fans of the Bond series, there may be a sort of revolt against a different kind of bond of ethnicity, or sex, if they went that far with it and cast a female, just like the hardcore fans did with the multiracial Fantastic Four movie that bombed very badly this year at the box office. Though I think part of the reason Fantastic Four bombed and tanked really, really bad was due to the fact of a bad script and just a lot of bad production problems. So, who will be the next Bond? Idris Elba seems like he's out of the running. There are a lot of names being thrown out there, and I'm open to new possibilities and different types of Bond. And we'll have to see, will the traditionalist win, or will we go with something more forward-thinking? You'll have to listen to find out.
Geek Homeworld Review Preview.
Welcome back, Cheryl, to the podcast.
Yay!
And we are talking Star Trek Beyond.
Woohoo! We have finally gotten beyond
the original trailers for it.
the horrible first trailer from December.
Yes.
I mean, I think there's one thing that's very clear now in the culture of today's blockbuster movies, and that's that the production companies really don't care if they appeal to the fan base or not, because they know
the fan base is going to show
we're
up.
going to go. I mean, we're going to go. Even if we just go and complain about it, we're going to go, and they're going to get our money, and that's all they care about. So in the first trailer, it's very clear that that was not designed for the fans, and very few fans, I think, enjoyed it. Although there were moments, I mean, there are definitely things with Bones and Spock and whatever that are enjoyable, but for the most part...
At least they're not going to die alone.
Typical. But for the most part, though, it was, wow, this is a really strange pace. This is way too much action. How come we're not getting to see the great characters that we love? And frankly, that J.J. Abrams, in the first of the reboot series, did a great job in casting. You know,
brilliant.
Really flawless casting to bring back our favorites. So we've been waiting to get something that'll make us feel better about this being a Star Trek movie. But, you know, we have to remember that in December, they were putting out a trailer knowing that it was going to be running in front of Star Wars The Force Awakens, and everybody and their cousin was putting a trailer in front of that, so you had to appeal to as broad a base as possible. So I don't think that we can complain about that, because the more people who see the Star Trek movie, the more movies that they might make eventually, and so it plays to our best interest. But it was still terrifying to think, wow, this is really going to be Star Trek Fast and Furious.
Which is what it's been touted as after seeing the original trailer, and it just had nothing to do with Star Trek. There was dirt bikes and...
To quote Will Wheaton, who tweeted back then, "I saw the weirdest trailer today. It was for a generic science fiction action movie, but it was all dressed up in Star Trek costumes." You know?
I think that nails it right there.
Of course, then I also saw with that tweet later, somebody had taken Picard and he was saying, "Shut up, Wesley." But, you know, even...
This time I agree with Leslie.
Even George Takei didn't like it. Simon Pegg, who co-wrote this film, was not a big fan of it. He said the reason he didn't love it is because he knows that there is a lot more to this film and more of stuff that he would call Star Trek stuff. So that was reassuring, at least. So once we got this one, I think we can see that it is more Star Trek. The pacing of it, the characters, all of that. So, you know, Scott Mendelson over at Forbes said, "This superior second trailer, which furthers the sale of the Star Trek, is still a franchise to give a damn about, will be seen by the next 2 months' worth of blockbuster-friendly moviegoers in front of X-Men Apocalypse, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Warcraft, Conjuring 2, Independence Day, Ghostbusters." And so even though there is a hashtag out there, not my Star Trek fan base, I think it's going to get a big audience because we have lots of time to build the audience. And now with a kind of fan-friendly trailer, we're going to get more excited about it too. I think we're going to cycle through moments of excitement and then anxiety and then excitement and then anxiety.
I think bringing Justin Lin from Fast and the Furious franchise in will definitely, obviously, as we've already seen, bring the action. But I wonder, are we getting to a point where we don't really have a choice as fans? We have to take what Star Trek's given to us.
Well, but it's not just Star Trek. I mean,
if they want to mess with us and throw motorcycles and dirt bikes at us, are we?
Well, I think a lot of the different franchises have gone in directions that the fans wouldn't have necessarily chosen. Even, probably the best at giving a damn about the fans is the Avengers universe with Marvel, but even there are departures that people aren't happy about. So the bottom line is you're never going to please all of the fans, but please get close, and I think
you've got all these years of Star Trek lore to, no pun intended, to live up to. It's hard to come up with an original story that's still forward thinking and exciting and hasn't already been done before.
Well, I mean, I think we put a lot of faith in J.J. Abrams and Robert Orci, who are producing this film, and the fact that Simon Pegg is co-writing, and then Justin Lin comes in, so there is going to be some adrenaline pumping. When that decision was made, that was clear where they were going to go.
I just hope that the action doesn't. I want action adventure. Don't get me wrong. But I want those moments, those interactions between the crew. I want to see the character development.
Absolutely, because that's a hallmark of Star Trek.
Yes.
The great characters, and that's why the first of the Star Trek reboot was so great, like we already said, because it was dead on casting.
And with this film, it looks like, especially with the second trailer that's come out this week, that maybe they're going to, crashing the Enterprise, destroying it. It's just you, your crew, and your ship, and now you don't have your ship. No. So we're going to get
there's another reason that it's obviously a Star Trek movie, because it's not Star Trek if you don't destroy the Enterprise.
Right. It must be damn near impossible to get anybody for Starfleet to the premiums they must have to pay for insurance on the Enterprise.
They talk to Flo at Geico and she bundles them.
She has to bundle a lot because...
Well, I think it's clear from the way that they launched this new trailer too that they're saying, okay, fans, we heard you, because they had a huge fan event on I think May 20th on Friday evening, and they screened the new trailer. They did it in the studio where they originally filmed the original series.
It was live on Facebook.
Adam Savage, big fan, former Mythbuster, he was there as the host. JJ was there, Justin Lin was there, Chris Pine and Zach Quinto and Carl Urban. And they also did a big tribute to Leonard Nimoy in memory of him, and they named one of the backlot streets there at Paramount in his memory.
Does this seem a little bit like desperation, or them freaking out, say we better bring out all our big guns and say, hey, we're still a Star Trek film. We're still a Star Trek film.
I don't know that they're that concerned. I just think that that they understand. Again, everything's a marketing ploy. They understand that the fans have been disgruntled, and in order to help build the excitement for the next 2 months before the film comes out, you need to get the fans excited and talking about it positively.
With the Star Wars movies continuing each year and all that, and Abrams coming off a brilliant Force Awakens movie, it'll be interesting to see how Star Trek is like Star Wars, and to see if he can keep up the momentum with Star Trek Beyond.
Well, there seems to be some lack of clarity about whether there's going to be another film in this series. A lot of people are saying it is just the 3 films, but then I've also heard, that Chris Pine and Zach Quinto are already in negotiations for the next film, so who knows what's going to happen, and it may depend on how things come out in July.
If this film does not do well, then we've got a problem. Now we have the TV series coming, on the new...
Well, let's not even go there, because let's say this though, because one of the things that did come out of the fan event on Friday, J.J. Abrams said that because of Justin Lin, basically, that Paramount is dropping the lawsuit against Axanar, Star Trek Axanar, that it's going to be going away because Justin Lin pushed, and that is very good news for fan films. If you don't know what Action Star is, it is a crowd-funded fan film that they were trying to do feature length, feature quality, and the Paramount people who own the copyright went after them for infringement. If that lawsuit had gone through, and if it had been successful, that would be the death knell for all fan films and fan fiction everywhere.
Well, there's almost a parallel when Metallica went after their fans for downloading their music on the internet illegally. And I mean, there are merits to each side of that, but there is a parallel on there. And so I think Star Trek's kind of backed off of that.
Yeah, I mean,
because people want to make their fan films.
Right.
It encourages, if you have enough resources, or even if it's extremely low budget, and you put your heart and soul in it, you love Star Trek that much, you're gonna make your own film, then you're definitely gonna go see whatever they put out
well,
in
and
theater.
it's supporting the rest of the franchise where they do make
like
the money.
podcasts and like ours that talk
we're gonna
about
not
it.
be allowed to talk about it.
Yeah.
Well,
Gosh.
so
What
back
would we
to
do then?
back to the trailer that everyone's been waiting for. Well, I think it does retain a sufficient amount of those action sequences that would appeal to the more general audiences that you had in the first trailer. This one offers more, like we said, of what we're used to from Star Trek. We get much more dialogue. It provides us more insight into the characters we love. And this is important in Star Trek. We see more about their deeper motivations. Star Trek is not a surface kind of film. And so we also are getting word that Gene Roddenberry's vision of an optimistic future for humanity told through a kind of space cowboy opera is also back in this film.
Which needs to be.
That's what we're hearing. So when we're coming off of, Star Trek Into Darkness, which was completely the opposite of that.
Which justified everything Khan did. Even though I enjoyed that film thoroughly.
I mean, I think there is room for that kind of adrenaline pumping action, but the first trailer was just too fast and too furious and too jarring. So, like so many other franchises and beloved characters, like Superman and Batman and X-Men, the Star Trek reboot with the second film had gone really dark. And Into the Darkness was the most political, I think, of all of the Star Trek films, even beyond The Undiscovered Country, which had outright references to the Cold War and to Glasnost and the death of the Soviet Union that was happening in the real world around it. Into Darkness offered all of the terror and hate and fear of today's political environment, but without the Shakespearean / operatic pacing and scope of The Undiscovered Country.
Which I loved.
Yeah, well, and with Shakespearean actors like David Warner and Christopher Plummer playing Chancellor Gorkon and General Chang, respectively, opposite Shatner, in a story co-created by Nimoy and brilliantly crafted and well-placed screenplay, The Undiscovered Country always lands towards the top of any ranking of Star Trek films. Wherever you see a ranking, it's going to be in those top few. But you compare that to Into Darkness, which is always near the bottom of the rankings, and how can you possibly... Here's how the thing is. How did they mess this up? Because how can you possibly take the perfect cast from the first of the reboots, face them off against Benedict Cumberbatch reprising the role of Roddenberry's most honored villain in a tribute remake of Wrath of Khan, which almost always is the number one on any ranking.
Except for me.
And still fall short.
Yes.
The answer is because the film didn't actually pay homage to Khan. Instead, they just borrowed his name. They made his story even more justifiable, as you said.
Not that Cumberbatch wasn't brilliant.
Right, but he was brilliant in the middle of a film that wasn't.
He wasn't really Khan. Yeah.
He was definitely not Khan. And then they punished him for doing the right thing. So the good thing is visually it was nice. But this, the lack of honoring the original Star Trek, combined with Abrams more or less jumping ship to rehash Star Wars for a new generation with more diverse casting, mixed with a director best known for high-octane car chases, then pour on top of that a trailer that exactly represented many fans' worst fears. And we were really getting hungry to get some reassurance from this trailer. So there was a lot, I think, riding on this. So, I do think we get the good amount of action in this new trailer, but we have the more classical soundtrack that's from the actual score, and not the frenetic, alternative, angry music of the Beastie Boys' Sabotage, which has a lot of references. I mean, it's what what Chris Pine's child character
Kirk, when
Kirk
stole the
car. And also, as we were talking about, there's a reference there also to Undiscovered Country, where Valeris talks about, sabotage that back in the 16th century or something.
About 400 years ago from their time, back on planet Earth, when workers felt threatened by automation, they flung their wooden shoes, called sabots, into the machines to stop them.
Yeah, so there is that idea. And the first time I thought, oh, they're playing Sabotage. That's what they were talking about. So it does play back, but it just didn't fit. So in this, we get more of the soul-revealing, character-driven dialogue that we love about every Star Trek cast that has ever been assembled. And of course, we can never object, like I said, to the Enterprise being completely destroyed. I mean, there's no way you can come out of a great Trek film and fly the Enterprise home at the end.
Right.
So with 2 months left until we can actually see beyond and overanalyze it for itself, we're gonna go through that kind of up and down manic depressive episodes about it.
Yeah, there were some wonderful from the latest trailer on the positive side. Some wonderful things that I liked, but I like the warp effect when you see the
warp bubble.
Yeah, you actually see that. And then there was a view from the Enterprise as it's warping away from Earth, and some of the instant quotes that I picked on were the exchange between Spock and Bones, where Spock says fear of death is illogical, and Bones says fear is what keeps us alive, man.
Yeah, and so then, that classic Bones and Spock.
And then Scotty saying when the black-white alien female just plops herself down into the captain's chair on the bridge, and Scotty says, he likes that chair.
Well, that's he's after that, not just the chair.
Exactly.
Because he's a very good young Kirk for sure.
Yeah, and it's but this is Star Trek Beyond is the 5-year mission, and I think now what they're trying to convey, even with the early trailers, is this is beyond what we know of Star Trek or what fans have experienced, and I'm hoping it's a 5-year mission as we originally told. I hope it goes, this movie, at the end of it, I hope we're beyond somewhere. Maybe we're out of the Alpha Quadrant, that maybe...
Wow, for me, that's jumping way too far out of the original series.
Maybe some Borg will show up.
We're already out of the timeline, and I understand that, and I'm cool with that, because otherwise we wouldn't be seeing this more dynamic Spock, which sometimes I'm not okay with, but, Zachary Quinto does a great job, nevertheless. Yes. But Ed and I are going to be there for the very first showing available that we can get in our area.
Maybe IMAX if we're lucky.
Hopefully.
Which the IMAX 3D on Into Darkness worked out great. Remember the volcano scene?
Yeah.
It was really awesome.
And last time there was a special sneak in our area, so maybe we'll get to that. And that'll give you all the opportunity to check back in here for our spoiler-free review at the end of that opening weekend.
Excellent. See you there. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Geek Homeworld podcast with your host, SavageTechman. You can find us on Libsyn, Google+, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, listen to us on iTunes, see us on YouTube, be part of our Mixler chats. Thank you. See you again on the Geek Homeworld podcast.
World.